Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Raven here with some more Arma 3. This is going to be a tutorial video on how to set up a live. I've seen a lot of people in the Steam discussions asking how to alive, basically, as well as a lot of people from my own community and other communities asking how we set up a live. So it's going to be split up into a few key subgroup areas. That way I can go over each individual section in depth. So there'll be like an intro to all of the modules, and that's what I'm going to do right now. And then the part two is going to be a video on the main modules that you need, like a life required, so on and so forth. And then there'll be the military objective or the military AI commander section, which will be like part 3 or 4. And then the civilian objective, and then the TAORs and stuff. So we'll go through that, and then uh, I'll have all of them linked in like a little live tutorial playlist sort of thing. That way you can follow it along and do what you need to do to set up a live. So basis behind a live, I personally believe it's extremely as quote unquote realistic as you can get in Arma, so to speak, because it adds the unpredictability aspect instead of like a Zeus mission where it's like, oh hey, there's this guy in this region, go find him. Um, you can do missions like, okay, we're going to go on a patrol in this given area, and whatever happens, happens. You may or may not run into AI, which makes it realistic in the sense of in real combat, you're not going to have uh, an actual engagement every kilometer. You could have a huge engagement and then not see anybody for like 10 clicks. So long story short, let's jump right into it. On this part where we'll pick a random map, we'll go with Altus for an example. So we'll load right in here. So basis of the alive stuff is to create a dynamic and ever-evolving battlefield. That's how I see it. So we're in the game. Oh, okay. Don't need to see that yet. Accidentally hit Shift Tab. So we'll just go over here at this airfield. This will be our main base. We won't worry about placing anybody down for the time being. So we'll close this guy down, and then you're going to want to go over to the F5 menu, which is Systems, and then click the Alive modules. So, like I said, this will be a brief rundown of all the modules that you'll use, and some that you won't. It's all your prerogative. So, the ones that you need to get everything to work is Alive Required, Alive Data, where's that? Alive Virtual AI System, and then I like to use the ambient dynamic weather. So these ones right here, these four, Alive Required, Alive Data, Alive Virtual AI System, and Alive Dynamic Weather. These are what you need to have the framework, the base framework, to get it to work. But down the road, you'll also need the AI commander, the Civ objective, the mill objective. Where's it at? Military close quarter battle, military AI skill, civilian placement, and civilian population. So a brief rundown, as the name suggests, Alive Required is, the main one that you need. Excuse me, hiccup. Burp thing. Alive Data is what you use to save to the war room, which is over here. So I'll sign into that and go over that in a second video, or towards the end of this one. But basically, under the Alive Data, this is what saves to the Alive War Room. a live virtual AI system is what you use to set the active AI limiter, the spawn radius around the players, the spawn radius around the player helicopter, spawn radius around player planes, so on and so forth. And then I like using the alive ambient dynamic weather. You can set it up to, the region that you're playing in, basically. Or if you're feeling froggy, you can use real world weather, and then refer to this guy over here for, um, actual locales that you can use and whatnot, or how to set it up, basically. But for this instance, we'll just use the base stuff in that. So on to the civilian population. This is the same concept as the virtual AI system. You set the amount active, you set spawn radius around planes, helicopters, and players. You can also set the hostility of the civilians against that designated faction. So, say you're playing this blue 4, you can set it from low to extreme. Or if you want them hostile towards Op4, you can do low to extreme. Same with independent. And then civilian roles, you can choose like Eastern or Western. So basically, the civilian roles is for civilian agents like priests, politicians, village elders, etc. The civilian placement is where you set the area of responsibility, basically the spawn area. You can blacklist so they don't spawn in a specific area. You set their objectives, like how they operate in that area that you give them. The priority filter. You can force a specific faction. So, say you're doing a Russian or a Middle Eastern operation, you can set it up so the civilians that are spawned in are spawned. Or I can't English today. The civilians that you want to use, you can spawn them in via alive with this module here. So you can designate specific factions. Fuck me, I can't English. Anywho, you can set their placement level. So this is for the civilian agents. You can set the ambient vehicles that spawn around, and then you can select the vehicle faction. So to the next one, which is military close quarter battle. This guy is for, as the name suggests, like close quarter battle areas. So basically in villages or areas that you want the AI to be able to spawn in, the enemy AI, and the it's basically like what's the word I'm looking for? Objectives, or just like stationary houses where AI will be garrisoned in those houses. The military AI commander is what controls all of these. Right here, the mill objective, the civ objective, and the close quarter battle. If you're feeling froggy and you're doing, like, say, a counterinsurgency sort of operation, you can use the military IED threat. But for this example, we won't use it. The civ objective, as the name suggests, the civ objective is in civilian population areas, and it's the same concept. You select the area of responsibility. You can select where they can't spawn. You can select the objective type filter. So, like, if you want them to be specifically around a HQ or a power plant or communications, like a radio tower or a fuel station or at a dock, or in a construction area or in a village, you can select that all here. I usually leave it on all. The size filter, I usually leave it on ignore small objectives. That way, tiny objectives aren't, like, controlled, so to speak. The priority, I don't change the priority. You want them to place units. This is where you can change the amount of spawned entities. For this example, we'll just leave it as default at 200. Force weighting, if you leave it on random, you can select down here and override specific amounts. So say you want the faction that you're fighting to have more tanks. You can, select down here that you want them to have more tanks out of the 200 available. And then also you can force the faction. Same with the military objective, area of responsibility, the blacklist, the objectives. You want them to place units. Force size we'll leave at 200. Actually, we'll up it to 400. Force weighting, um, leave it at random. And then at the readiness, you can select the readiness to have, like, if you want 75% of them to have their pants around their ankles, you can select it to 25%. Or if you want all of them to have 100% readiness and be able to respond to objectives and respond to you in the area, you can leave it at 100%. Random camps, you can select to have random camps spawned around. For this example, we'll just leave it on none. But all random camps does is within the area of responsibility, it spawns random camps that AI defend and or are garrisoned at, kind of like the Civ objective. And then once again, down at the override, you can override specific amounts out of that 400 that we selected. Force faction, same concept. You can force the faction. We'll get to that here once we hit that part. Create field HQ. I usually leave this on yes. That way, when you're around the, or not field HQ, but create HQ, whenever you're around their HQ, because it looks like a headquarters. Field HQ makes a smaller version of that HQ, and that's out in the field. Area units, depending on the faction that you're using, you can either select yes or no. If they have air assets in their faction, then you can use it, but if not, I usually select it on no. That way, when stuff spawns in, they don't explode. Place supplies, I leave that on yes. Place supplies, all it does is in key locations, it places like weapons caches and like vehicle ammo and stuff for the enemy to utilize. Ambient vehicles, depending on how you want it to be set up, you can either have ambient vehicles, but use this one at your own risk. I've noticed over the past like 15-16 months of us using Alive, the ambient vehicles, if they're set high, you'll encounter I can't fucking English. You will encounter, there we go, or incur a FPS drop as vehicles are spawning in and despawning. And then ambient guards, this is new. I usually leave this on high. That way, there's guards and key locations. The military AI skill, you can select what faction. Say you're using two factions, you can have one as a recruit and one as an expert faction, or one as a regular, one as veteran, or you could have both of them as regular factions. I typically don't change any of these values. I think the only one that I usually change is like general. So like I'll up their general skill like to like 0.75 or something like that, or 0.35 or 0.33, just depending on the faction that we're fighting. But up here, this is where you would designate the faction. So purple, we'll get to that here shortly. And then, as I said, with the military AI commander, this is the one that controls all of the AI that are being spawned in. For this example, we're going to leave it on, or we're going to set it to persistent because you want it to be persistent. The control type, we're going to have it on occupation because they're going to be occupying an area. But the three options, you have invasion, occupation, and asymmetric. Invasion is, as the name suggests, the AI will go out and look for, objectives outside of their area of responsibility to expand their area. Occupation, they stay within their given area and they do objectives such as patrols and whatnot within their given area. And then asymmetric is it's insurgency, basically. It's a what's the word I'm looking for? Like guerrilla warfare, where the AI recruit from civilian populations. They place IEDs, they have in placed IEDs. You can set it up to have suicide bombers, etc. Constant for reinforcements, you have three options. You have constant, packets, and seldom. Seldom meaning there's very rarely reinforcements that come in. Packets, there's like groups that come in, and then constant, there's going to be a constant stream of reinforcements coming in as you eradicate them. Intel, you have none, seldom, and often. I typically leave it on seldom because it's more realistic that way. It's like uh, 1 out of every 10 soldiers, maybe. I don't know the exact numbers for it, but there'll be, a chance of intel being found on dead AI that incur or encounter. Um, so we'll put that on seldom. Faction, I don't really worry about these. If you're going to be using vanilla Arma, this is where you can select the faction. Um, However, typically for this example, I use the override factions, and we'll get to that. That's on the Alive Wiki under the supported factions tab. The max simultaneous attacks, I usually leave this at default, which is 10, and then recruitment size. This only works if you're using asymmetric warfare. So this is the amount of civilians needed to be recruited, basically, or to set up a recruitment center. So for the brief overview, that's all that. These are all the modules that you need to have placed. There's other modules like the military air component commander. Don't really use that because it's really buggy, but you can set it up. If that's your prerogative. I usually don't use player logistics or player like any of the player supports, mainly because our group is all player driven. We don't have any AI doing anything other than trying to kill us. The map indexer you don't really need to worry about unless you're trying to index a map that isn't supported previously under the supported maps tab. If you want a tour, you can select that guy. The Orbat creator is how you can tell if a faction is supported or not, or you can change their uniforms. That's your prerogative. But I typically don't really use that. I only use that to go through and see if factions are supported or not. Yeah, that's part one. I'm going to save this as the live tutorial thingy really quick. And then we'll jump right back into it here in a minute. So if you like this video, guys, and you want to see the other parts, like I said, there'll be a playlist. So yeah, if you liked it, make sure you leave a like, comment, subscribe. If you do subscribe, hit that little bell icon. Also, feel free to share the playlist and whatnot. So hope to see you guys in the next part. Cheers.